Hi, I'm Jaimee Francis, a features editor at JURIST and a first-year law student at Boston University. Today, I will be interviewing Ukraine correspondent Yaroslav Pavliuk to get his unique perspective on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This is part of an ongoing series of interviews with our Ukraine correspondents, who include law students and young lawyers with ties to Ukraine. Yaroslav is originally from Kiev and is still living in the Kiev region. Yaroslav, will you please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Yaroslav. I had a privilege to take a LLM course at the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm currently a lawyer in Ukraine, and I'm staying here. So I had some impression of the ongoing crisis and war, and that I would like to share with you.
Thank you, Yaroslav. So can you please tell us what your life was like before the invasion?
I'm a lawyer at a law firm in banking and finance and business law, and I was also completing a master's course at my Ukrainian university in order to qualify for the bar. So I basically worked and combined it with my master's studies. That was my final year of my master's program in Ukraine, and also, yes, I worked as a lawyer, and that was basically what my life looked like this year.
Yeah, so how did you learn about the invasion, and what were your initial thoughts about it?
I think it's quite difficult to say exactly, because from one point of view, we heard the rumors back in November 2021 that Russian forces are building up across the Ukrainian borders, and foreign intelligence sources told us that the invasion is not only likely but imminent, as some Western intelligence sources put it. And I think the closer it took to the February 24th, the more evident it became that the invasion is inevitable. And actually, I saw it in my work. The way clients behave, the way clients reached to us in order to have some advice on how to relocate their personnel to foreign countries or even to Western Ukrainian regions. So I think starting from January, and especially the first half of February, it was quite present in Ukrainian society, the idea that something will happen. And I think the day of invasion itself, I woke up at 5 a.m., I think, and I read the news, and I heard the alarm systems about the air raids or possible missile strikes, and that's how it looked like.
Yeah, so can you tell us more about how your life has changed since then?
I think the most drastic change was to leave the Kyiv city itself, my hometown. I'm now currently staying in the Kyiv region, some 80 miles away from the city, but I know a lot of my friends have already returned back in May or late April, when the Kyiv suburbs were liberated from the Russian forces. So it's more or less safe in Kyiv itself, but still sometimes it's dangerous because the missiles strike in the city, and some people tend not to go back so early. I think I will not go back as well for the time being, but I had to leave on the second day of the offensive, on the 25th of February. The city was not surrounded from the north yet, and there was a free way to go south, but there were kilometers of traffic jams to exit the city. And as I happen to know later, more than 2 million people actually fled the city, half of its population. So it was quite a panic the first days, but I think it was much better than some other places in the east of Ukraine. So in Kyiv, actually in the city itself, managed to the Ukrainian forces managed to hold the city and did not let Russian forces in the city itself, but the clashes in the suburbs, some 20 miles from the city center, were quite heavy, and there were a lot of civilian casualties. The massacres happening in those suburbs, I think, were the first images that the Western audience saw, and those made a difference of how this conflict is seen by some Western audience, and that was the trigger for more assistance to Ukraine, actually.
So coming back, was it as difficult and as much as a panic to re-enter Kiev as it was to leave Kiev?
I think so, but as I told, a lot of my friends already returned, and the city is trying to resume their normal live. So I think some shops and restaurants are even open now, and more people are returning. But I read the statistics from the UN. So more than 6 million Ukrainian refugees are still abroad, mostly in Western Europe, in Poland, or dispersed in further European nations. And just in total, more than 11 million, so a quarter of total Ukrainian population was displaced. And people are trying to go back to their native cities, but some still hesitate just to see what happens next. And it's still too early to call what the result will be.
Yeah, so as you said, it's too early to tell what the results will be, but given the large amount of people that have been displaced and even left the country, how do you think this will impact the future of Ukraine in the long term?
I think it's a great tragedy for many people, because thousands of people have died. We don't know even how many have died in the eastern regions. For example, the city of Mariupol, which under occupation now, some reports allege that tens of thousands of people are dead there, and there are a lot of wounded. So that's a tragedy for the entire nation. And just on the positive side, many people try to see it as an opportunity to defend our nation, to build it on the new foundation as a truly independent and more progressive, more strong, and the Ukrainian society is very united now. A lot of volunteers, a lot of people are trying to advocate on different platforms, whether it be military men or volunteers or journalists, or just refugees who are holding events in the European capitals or in North American capitals, to calling for support from the international audience. So I think many nations in their history have some decisive turning point, and I hope that despite all the losses and sacrifices, it will be a foundation to revive Ukraine and to build it even better than it was before.
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about how Ukrainians have been really united and mobilized, and even talked about how they've been organizing things outside of Ukraine in different countries. And so I was curious, what are your thoughts about how other nations around the world have responded to this crisis?
I think some nations, especially our close friends and allies like the United States, UK, Poland, some nations of the European Union were very welcoming to Ukrainian refugees. For example, Poland, as I know, welcomed more than 2 million Ukrainian refugees, and was enormously helpful in terms of humanitarian aid, of giving hospitals and schools to school opportunities for Ukrainian children. And military assistance is a very important component as well, because it's important to defend the country not only by humanitarian means, but by hard weapons, because that statistics shows that it's really important to give an adequate military response to Russia, because Russia will not stop if it's not stopped by force. And I think it was not entirely clear for all people. And even in the West, there are some dissenting voices that try to claim you need to make peace with Russia, you need to give up Ukraine, to sacrifice half of its territory, and then Russia will just be okay doing business as usual. But that's not how it works. And I think that was the main problem of these of why this war started, because back in 2014, when Russia first annexed part of Ukrainian territory, that was the response. The response was very weak, and the sanctions imposed on Russia were very trivial. And now, as we see the news reports, the Russian military tanks and aircrafts, they have Western components from some French, German, and even US companies that were successful in circumventing the sanctions and supplying those goods to Russia. So I think that should be a good lesson, that if you don't stop a rogue state, the situation will just deteriorate. And ultimately, they will come after you if you don't stop them in advance.
Yeah, so a lot of the conversation was about more larger scale initiatives like sanctions and humanitarian aid. Do you have any advice for individuals across the world how they can respond effectively to the crisis?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of volunteering opportunities in the countries where Ukrainian refugees are settled temporarily. And I think there are options to donate money for humanitarian causes and to direct resources. I know of the account created by the National Bank of Ukraine, so that should be a pretty reliable one where individuals can safely donate money. And I think it's important to just to show their solidarity and call upon their national governments to make progress, because the progress by not sacrificing Ukraine, but by helping Ukraine to win, which is very important. Both for Ukrainian security, but I believe for the world as well, because I don't think the present war is about Ukraine alone. It's about global safety, because when we see the United Nations, where Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council with a veto power, and that nation who has the privilege of vetoing any decision, and this country is an aggressor, I think people all across the world are losing their faith in the institutions, and it's about Asian nations, about African nations, American nations, and I think there is a good story to show that Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal in 1994, and after that it received guarantee that it will not be attacked, but it was. And maybe it's a bad signal for all the states that are trying to militarize themselves, because they understand if they don't defend themselves properly, they cannot rely on any guarantees. And I would prefer that the world nations spend more money on some global projects like exploring space, fighting with poverty, with climate change, and not just squander billions and billions on tanks and weapons. But unfortunately, that's what we have to do now.
Yeah, that was great insight. And I know you touched earlier when we talked about the refugees and the people who've been displaced and trying to get back, and how the future of Ukraine will look different. And I did want to ask you, what were your hopes and dreams for the future of Ukraine?
I certainly hope that we will be able to secure our independence. And so the prospective goals of Ukraine as they are declared now is to join the European Union, and just to have the opportunities of the United Europe to rebuild our country, and to have a security alliance that will permit Ukraine to preserve its territorial integrity, and just to rebuild and to move on to the future, to be a reliable partner in the world, and to promote the good ideas, the ideas of democracy, of choice, of diversity, of solidarity. I think that's what the goal of our country should be. And I think some of the Ukrainians that had to leave our country are showing this, and I was really amazed about the solidarity in many countries of the world, and not only in Europe and North America. People all across the world see this crisis and need to respond to it properly, and not only to the Ukrainian war. I think it's time for us to be a global community and just to prevent injustice and prevent wars globally. I think that's a message that Ukraine should be sending and is sending now.
Thank you, Yaroslav, for all of your insight. I really appreciate it, and everyone at JURIST really appreciates it.
Thank you for inviting me, and I was happy to share some thoughts. Thank you.